This incompetent fraud must leave. My uncle shouted at the board meeting. I quietly opened the patent files and said, "Check the inventor's name." When the documents appeared, the room went silent. The Anderson family had built Meditech Solutions from nothing, or at least that's what my Uncle Robert loved to tell everyone at every company event. Standing at the podium in his perfectly tailored suit, he'd recount how he and my father had started in their garage, two brothers with a dream of revolutionizing medical technology. What he never mentioned was that it was my father, James Anderson, who had been the true innovator, the genius behind the patents that built our empire. And he certainly never mentioned how he'd maneuvered to take control after my father's accident 10 years ago. I'm David Anderson, and this is the story of how I spent 5 years secretly reclaiming my father's legacy, one patent at a time. David, are you even listening? Uncle Robert's voice cut through my thoughts. We were sitting in his corner office, 42 floors above Seattle's bustling tech district. These quarterly reports are unacceptable. R&D costs are through the roof, and we have nothing to show for it. I adjusted my glasses, a gesture that always made him think I was nervous. We're making progress, Uncle Robert. The new neural interface project is a waste of resources. He cut in, tossing the report onto his mahogany desk. The board meeting is next week. I need results, not promises. Or maybe it's time to admit that unlike your father, you didn't inherit the innovation gene. I get back my response. If he only knew that the neural interface project was already complete, its patents quietly filed under my private holding company, just like the last 3 failed projects he killed. Perhaps you're right, I said, playing my part. Maybe I should focus on something smaller. He leaned back, satisfaction crossing his face. I've been saying that for years. You're not your father, David. The sooner you accept that, the better. I gathered my papers and stood to leave. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see our company logo glowing against the Seattle skyline. Meditech Solutions, innovating tomorrow's healthcare. Oh, and David? Uncle Robert called as I reached the door. Clean yourself up before the board meeting. That shabby professor look might have worked in R&D, but you're presenting to the board now. Try to look like an Anderson for once. I nodded and left, walking past the portrait of my father that hung in the corridor. James Anderson smiled down at me, frozen in time before the accident that had left him in a coma, before Uncle Robert had used the crisis to seize control, forcing my mother to sell her shares for a fraction of their worth. I was 17 then, too young to stop it, but not too young to start planning. My office was 20 floors down, smaller, darker, and cluttered with the organized chaos of actual research. Sarah, my assistant and the only person who knew the truth, was waiting with a stack of documents. He fell for it, she asked, closing the door. I smiled, loosening my intentionally crooked tie completely. Has Marcus confirmed the patent office's decision? She handed me a sealed envelope. Came through this morning. All 7 patents approved, backdated to your original filings, the neural interface, the bioelectric mesh, everything. Your uncle has no idea they even exist. And the ownership structure, triple blind holding companies, just like the others. Even if they trace them, they'll never get through all the layers. She paused, watching me review the documents. David, are you sure about this? Once you reveal everything at the board meeting, I touched the photograph on my desk, my father at me in his lab, both of us grinning over some shared discovery. He tried to erase my father from his own company, Sarah, used a family tragedy to steal everything we built. And now he has the nerve to tell me, I'm not good enough to be an Anderson. While you've secretly developed more groundbreaking patents in 5 years than the company has in the last 10, she finished. I know. I just be careful. Men like your uncle don't lose gracefully. I locked the patents in my safe and turned to my computer, checking the special email account I used to communicate with my father's old friend, Judge William Morrison. The reply I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. Medical proxy transfer approved. You now have full legal authority regarding your father's care. Another piece falling into place. Uncle Robert had arranged for my father's care at a private facility, maintaining control over both his medical decisions and his remaining patents. He'd never expected me to spend years building relationships with the hospital board, documenting every neglectful decision, every mistreatment opportunity. Sarah was still watching me, concern evident in her expression. What aren't you telling me? The doctors say there's a new treatment, experimental, using technology based on Dad's original research that Uncle Robert buried because it wasn't immediately profitable. I met her gaze. There's a chance it could help him wake up. My God, she whispered. Does your uncle know? He will. At the board meeting, along with everything else, I turned back to the photograph. 10 years ago, he thought he'd won everything. The company, the patents, the Anderson legacy. He thought I was just a scared teenager who'd accept whatever scraps he offered. But you were already planning this, Sarah said softly. Even then. I nodded, remembering that first night after the accident when I'd found my father's hidden lab notebooks, when I discovered the truth about Uncle Robert's involvement in the equipment failure that had put my father in a coma. A scared teenager who spent the next decade becoming exactly what he wanted. The quiet, ineffective nephew who couldn't live up to his father's genius. The perfect cover for building something right under his nose. My phone buzzed. A message from Uncle Robert's secretary. Mr. Anderson requests your preliminary presentation materials by 5 p.m. I smiled, thinking of the presentation I'd actually prepared. Not the watered-down failure he was expecting, but a comprehensive revelation of every patent I'd secretly developed, every innovation he'd dismissed as impossible. Every piece of evidence proving that I wasn't just my father's son. I was his revenge. Sarah, I said, straightening my purposefully rumpled jacket, I think it's time we stop playing the part of the incompetent division. Call Marcus at the patent office. Tell him to prepare everything we discussed. Next week's board meeting is going to be educational. She nodded, already reaching for her phone. And your uncle? I looked out at the Seattle skyline, at the company logo my father had designed. Let him enjoy his corner office for a few more days. After all, the best revenge isn't just about winning. It's about letting them see exactly how badly they've lost. The stage was set. The patents were secured. And in 7 days, Uncle Robert would learn that the nephew he dismissed as a failure had been building an arsenal of innovations that would reshape not just the company, but the entire medical technology industry, all while playing the role of the disappointment he created. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in fighting back, but in letting them think they've already won. And next week, when those patent documents appeared on the screen, Uncle Robert would finally understand just how completely he'd lost the war he didn't even know he was fighting. The week before the board meeting passed in a blur of careful preparation. Uncle Robert, confident in his control, had no idea that every dismissive comment, every condescending gesture was being meticulously documented. Each interaction, another nail in the coffin of his carefully constructed lies. Your presentation materials are a joke, he declared, tossing my intentionally flawed preliminary report across his desk. Basic research any first-year intern could produce. Is this really the best you can do? I adjusted my glasses nervously, a gesture I'd practiced until it became second nature. I can revise it. Don't bother. He turned to stare out his window at the Seattle skyline. I've already asked Dr. Phillips to prepare a backup presentation. At least he understands what real innovation looks like. Dr. Phillips, the same researcher who had helped Uncle Robert salvage my father's lab equipment 10 years ago. I'd found the evidence in encrypted emails, carefully preserved on backup servers that Robert thought he'd wiped clean. Of course, I mumbled, gathering the scattered papers. Whatever you think is best. His voice stopped me at the door. You know, David, maybe it's time you considered a different career path. Your father, he'd understand. Not everyone inherits the genius gene. I turned, letting him see exactly what he expected. Defeat, resignation, the familiar shame of a son who couldn't measure up. Maybe you're right. Back in my office, Sarah was waiting with the real presentation materials. Everything's ready, she said, closing the door. Marcus confirmed that all patent registrations are now publicly searchable. The timing will be perfect. I unlocked my safe and pulled out a thick folder labeled Project Legacy. Every innovation I developed over the past 5 years, each one building on my father's original research, the neural interface that could revolutionize prosthetic limbs, the bioelectric mesh that could regenerate damaged nerve tissue, and most importantly, the therapeutic protocol that could help patients like my father emerge from long-term comas. The hospital board voted this morning, Sarah continued. They've approved the transfer of your father's care to the new facility. Everything's in place for the treatment to begin next week. I nodded, thinking of the private medical center I'd secretly helped fund, staffed by doctors who'd worked with my father before the accident. Has Uncle Robert noticed any of the preparations? He's too busy damage controlling the Milton contract situation. Sarah smirked. Apparently, their CEO was very upset to learn that their primary contact at Meditech has been developing revolutionary technology for a competing firm. That had been one of my more elegant moves, using a shell company to file patents that would directly compete with Uncle Robert's most lucrative contracts. The resulting stock volatility had the board nervous, making them more receptive to what I was about to reveal. David? Sarah's voice softened. There's something else you should see. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a police report from 10 years ago. The official investigation into my father's accident. Most of it I'd seen before, but one detail caught my eye. A witness statement that had been mysteriously deleted from the digital records. Where did you find this? Your father's old secretary finally agreed to talk. She kept a hard copy, afraid of what your uncle might do if he knew. Sarah pointed to a highlighted section. Read this part. The statement described unusual activity in the lab the night before the accident. Someone accessing the equipment after hours, making unauthorized modifications. The witness had reported it to Robert Anderson, who assured her he would handle it personally. The next day, My father was found unconscious in his lab, the victim of an unexplained equipment malfunction. We already knew he was responsible, I said quietly. Yes, but this is proof. Official documentation that he was warned about potential tampering and did nothing. Sarah met my gaze. This isn't just about patents anymore, David. This is criminal negligence at best, attempted murder at worst. I carefully reseal the envelope, have copies sent to every board member's private email, time to arrive during my presentation. The next few days passed in careful orchestration. I made sure to appear distracted and unprepared whenever Uncle Robert was watching. I fumbled equipment during demonstrations, stuttered through progress reports, played the part of the failing son so perfectly that he actually began to feel sorry for me. I've been thinking, he said during our final pre-board meeting, maybe we could find you a position in corporate communications, something less technical. That's very kind, I replied, letting my voice shake slightly. But I'd like to try presenting my research first, one last time. He sighed paternally. If you insist, just try not to embarrass yourself too badly for your father's sake. The morning of the board meeting, I arrived early to find Sarah already in my office, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Marcus called, she reported. The patent office just published everything. Full documentation, complete ownership trails, all of it. She paused. There's no going back after this. I walked to my window, looking down at the city awakening below. Somewhere out there, in a private medical facility, my father lay waiting for the treatment that could bring him back to us. The treatment his own brother had dismissed as impossible. Did you know, I said quietly, that the night before the accident, Dad told me he was planning to remove Uncle Robert from the company. He discovered financial irregularities, unauthorized testing, ethical violations. He was going to present it all at the next board meeting. Sarah's eyes widened. Just like you're doing today. History repeats itself. I turned back to my desk, beginning to gather the real presentation materials. But this time, the son finishes what the father started. My phone buzzed. Uncle Robert's final message before the meeting. Try not to waste too much of the board's time, Dr. Phillips' presentation will cover any gaps. I smiled, thinking of the gaps that were about to be revealed in his own carefully constructed facade. The patents he didn't know existed, the witness statement he thought he buried, the evidence of his involvement in my father's accident. It's time, Sarah said softly. I straightened my tie, no more intentional sloppiness, and picked up my presentation materials. Uncle Robert wanted me to be a failure, I said. He spent 10 years convincing everyone that I couldn't live up to my father's legacy, and instead, I surpassed it, built something bigger than he could imagine. Right under his nose, I headed for the door. Let's go show him exactly what the Anderson genius gene can do. The boardroom awaited, and with it, a reckoning 10 years in the making. Uncle Robert thought he was about to witness my final failure. Instead, he was about to learn that sometimes the greatest innovations aren't just technological. Sometimes they're the careful, patient construction of a truth so powerful, it can shatter a decade of lies with a single presentation. And I had one hell of a presentation ready. The Meditech Solutions boardroom gleamed with power and privilege. 15 board members seated around a massive mahogany table, each representing billions in investment capital. Uncle Robert sat at the head, naturally, with Dr. Phillips at his right hand. I could see them exchanging confident smiles, already anticipating my humiliation. If only they knew. Let's begin, Uncle Robert announced, his voice carrying that familiar note of condescension. David has prepared a presentation on his recent research activities. Try to be patient. A few board members chuckled politely. I stood, connecting my laptop to the room's display system. Sarah sat in the corner, recording everything as planned. Thank you, Uncle Robert, I said, my voice steady. No more nervous adjustments of my glasses. No more practice stumbling. I'd like to discuss the future of medical technology, specifically in neural interfaces and regenerative medicine. We've been through this, Robert interrupted. Your preliminary reports showed no viable. Those weren't my real reports, I said quietly. The room went still. Those were what I wanted you to see. Just like you've spent 10 years seeing exactly what you wanted to see. A failure, a disappointment, a son who couldn't match his father's genius. I clicked to the first slide. Patent documents filled the screen. My name clearly listed as inventor, then another, and another. 7 in total, each representing a breakthrough that could revolutionize modern medicine. What is this? Dr. Phillips demanded, shuffling through his papers. These patents aren't in our database because they don't belong to Meditech, I replied. They're registered to my private holdings. Every innovation you dismissed, every project you killed, I developed them independently while playing the role you created for me. Uncle Robert's face had gone pale. This is corporate espionage using company resources for private. Actually, I clicked to the next slide showing detailed financial records. Everything was developed using my own resources. Resources I've been accumulating since I was 17, since the day of my father's accident. The boardroom erupted in whispers. I saw several members checking their phones, no doubt finding the email Sarah had timed to arrive at exactly this moment. The neural interface you called impossible, I continued, my voice gaining strength. It's already in clinical trials. The regenerative mesh you said would never work. 3 major hospitals are preparing to adopt it. And the coma recovery protocol you dismissed as fantasy. I turned directly to my uncle. That begins testing next week on Dad. Robert shot to his feet. He is incompetent. He fraud must believe, he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. He's trying to steal my brother's legacy. Your brother's legacy? I opened the final file. Let's talk about that legacy, Uncle Robert. Let's talk about what really happened in Dad's lab 10 years ago. The police report appeared on screen. The witness statement highlighted. Then the encrypted emails between Robert and Dr. Phillips discussing equipment modifications, financial records showing money transferred to offshore accounts the day before the accident. You see, I addressed the board directly. My father was planning to remove his brother from the company. He discovered ethical violations, unauthorized testing, financial fraud. He was going to present it all at the next board meeting. I paused, letting the parallel sink in. Sound familiar? Dr. Phillips suddenly stood heading for the door, but 2 security guards, ones I personally hired, blocked his exit. 10 years ago, you thought you'd won everything, I told my uncle who had collapsed back into his chair. The company, the patents, the Anderson legacy. You thought you destroyed one brother and controlled the other. You don't understand, he whispered. I built this company too. I deserve to newly kill your brother, to steal his son's inheritance, to bury innovations that could help millions just because they weren't immediately profitable. I shook my head. No, Uncle Robert, you deserved exactly what you're about to get. On cue, the boardroom doors opened. 2 police detectives entered, followed by my father's old secretary, the witness whose statement had been buried a decade ago. Robert Anderson, the lead detective announced, you're under arrest for attempted murder, corporate fraud, and criminal conspiracy. As they led my uncle away, I turned back to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll find complete documentation of everything I've presented today in your secure emails, along with my proposal for restructuring Meditech's leadership and implementing these new technologies. One by one, they nodded. They were business people after all. They knew a winning proposition when they saw one. The next few hours passed in a blur of signatures, handshakes, and congratulations. By sunset, I stood in my father's old office, my office now, watching the city lights come alive below. Sarah found me there, holding a fresh stack of papers. The hospital called. They're ready to begin your father's treatment whenever you give the word. I touched the photograph on the desk. Dad and me in his lab, both of us grinning. Schedule it for tomorrow. It's time to bring him home. The media's going crazy, she added. Everyone wants to know how the failed son managed to develop 7 groundbreaking patents while pretending to be incompetent. I smiled, thinking of all the roles we play in life. The failed son, the grieving nephew, the secret genius biding his time. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them I learned from the best. My father taught me that true innovation isn't about appearance or power. It's about patience, dedication, and the quiet certainty that truth eventually prevails. Later that night, I visited Dad in his new medical facility. The doctors were optimistic about the treatment's potential. Even if he didn't fully recover, they expected him to regain consciousness, to finally learn how his son had protected and avenged his legacy. You are right, Dad, I whispered, holding his hand. The Anderson genius didn't skip a generation. It just learned to work in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. In the end, the greatest revenge wasn't just reclaiming the patents or exposing Uncle Robert's crimes. It wasn't even about becoming CEO of the company he tried to steal. The greatest revenge was knowing that somewhere in a prison cell, my uncle was finally understanding the truth. He'd spent 10 years mentoring his own destruction, teaching me exactly how to play the role of the failure while building something far greater than he could imagine. And that was the most innovative thing of all, because sometimes the quietest revolutions are the ones that change everything. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in what you show the world, but in what you keep hidden until exactly the right moment. Just ask Uncle Robert. He has plenty of time to think about it now. As for me, I have a company to run, technologies to develop, and most importantly, a father to help heal.